Go ahead, kill your camera.
Good afternoon, everybody. I would like to welcome you to today's installment of the latest Sustainable Fleet Technology webinar series, Evaluating Fueling and Charging Infrastructure Costs. My name is Alric Lunsford. I'm a clean transportation specialist at the North Carolina Clean Energy Technology Center on the Clean Transportation Program. Wanted to let you all know that this webinar is currently being recorded in progress, and over the next couple of days, you will receive a copy of the recording. Wanted to start off with a little bit of a brief intro about the North Carolina Clean Energy Technology Center. So the center itself provides services to public entities, governments, businesses, utilities, and citizens relating to the development and adoption of clean energy technologies, including the transportation sector. And through these programs and activities, we envision and seek to promote the development and use of clean energy in ways that stimulates a sustainable economy. We're proud to partner with NAFA, the world's largest membership association for individuals who manage vehicular fleets and mobility responsibilities, to expand access to this webinar series. And I am going to go ahead and hand it off to the speakers for today, starting off with Rick Sapienza, who is the moderator. Rick, the floor is yours.
Great, thank you, Alec. So, welcome to the Sustainable Fleet Technology webinar series. As Alec said, today's topic or title of the session is Evaluating Fueling and Charging Infrastructure Costs. When looking at alternative fuels, I mean, one of the main questions you ask is, how do I get access to the fuel we're using, be it electric, natural gas, propane, biofuels, etc. So, there's questions regarding, working with your supplier, this potential facility, considerations, and many others. And we got some folks here that are going to go through a couple of different fuels and how they've approached it. Do want to thank our sponsors, eBOS, Pioneer Mobility with eBOS. It's a portable charging system with multiple configurations. Geotab, telematics company, Sharp Energy, I do propane, electric, etc. And then the Soybean Board. They promote bio-based lubricants and cleaners. This is part of a series. Here are some of the other dates we have. There you can register at nafa.org/SFT or at the Sustainable Fleet webinar website, Sustainable Fleet, what is it? SustainableFleetExpo.com is the one for the series that has the webinars and the conference, as well as it has past webinars, presentations, and recordings on them as well. The next one is June 20th. Again, same time, 2 to 3:30, and it's requirements for federal funding for EV charging infrastructure. Do want to remind folks the Sustainable Fleet Technology Conference and Expo is coming up. This year it's in Durham, August 13th through the 15th, with August 13th being a pre-conference day. NAFA is going to host Sustainable Fleet Manager training, as well as the Green Fleet Awards and our Green Fleet session. And there'll be others if you check sustainablefleetexpo.com. As things come available or more clear, the schedule will be updated. Here's my contact information. Folks may remember me when I was at NC State. I've changed positions recently. I'm with Wake Tech Community College. Still here as a resource for the industry, focus more on the training of your technician side at this point. But here's my contact information. Feel free to contact me if there's a need. Here are presenters for today. Rick Longebart, he's a fleet operations manager for the city of Raleigh. He's been active in the fleet industry for over 40 years, working with 4 different government agencies. He's helped lead the city of Raleigh vehicle fleet services and being recognized as the #1 large fleet and overall #1 fleet in the nation in 2023. He's also co-founder of Longebart Ross Consulting, and Profit Software and EV Seamless Transition Group, where he helps fleets across the nation, including Canada, become more efficient, effective, and productive organizations. Rick today is going to give an overview of all the alternative fuels that the city of Raleigh is using right now, including successes, challenges, and future plans for their sustainability. Our second speaker today is Mike Cesary. He's the Director of National Accounts for Clean Energy Fuels. He's been with Clean Energy for a little more than 17 years, 15 of which he spent working with leading refuse and recycling companies, seeking to benefit from both fuel and operational cost savings associated with transitioning their diesel fleets over to clean, domestic compressed and renewable natural gas. Today, Mike leads Clean Energy's sales and business development with national trucking fleets in the U.S. He's a graduate of the University of Delaware, where he played football and then went on and spent 3 years in the NFL. Mike today will cover renewable natural gas as a cost-effective and reliable alternative fuel in heavy-duty trucking. Third speaker today is Jim O'Leary, Vice President at NFI Industries. He's an industry veteran with close to 20 years of logistics experience in IT operations and fleet management. Most recently, Jim has led NFI's efforts to decarbonize their fleet by participating in industry transforming projects such as Daimler's Innovation Fleet, Volvo Lights, and JETSI. At NFI, Jim is a founding member of their Diversity and Inclusion Council and Sustainability Task Force, both focused on executing NFI's strategy of people, innovation, and customer value. In 2023, Jim also served on Fleet Owner Magazine's editorial advisory board. Today, he'll cover the life cycle of NFI Industries' fleet of vehicles, focusing on tractors and trailers from an electrification and zero emissions initiatives perspective. And our final speaker for today is Andy Burnham. He's a principal environmental scientist at Argonne National Lab. His research focuses on transportation, energy, and environmental issues, specifically with the energy use and emissions analysis for advanced vehicle technologies and transportation fuels. He's most known for developing the alternative fuel life cycle, environmental and economic transportation tool known as A-Fleet, which estimates petroleum use, greenhouse gas emissions, air pollutant emissions, and cost of ownership for light duty and heavy duty alternative fuel and advanced vehicles. Andy's talk today will cover a broader scope of what organizations have gone through and how the A-Fleet tool can help with calculating return on investment, assisting analysis of reporting of all fuel calculations and estimates for emissions. And with that, I'm going to let Rick Longobart from the City of Raleigh take over from here. Rick, it's all yours.
Thank you, Rick. Appreciate the opportunity. Thank you, everyone, wherever you may be, either afternoon or good morning. Appreciate the time today and look forward to this webinar. I'd like to start off by painting a little bit of a picture of what the City of Raleigh looks like behind the scenes, and then talk a little bit about our efforts and successes in the alternative clean energy environment. The City of Raleigh obviously is a very large urban city. The vehicle fleet operation is the largest division in the entire city of Raleigh, which consists of 78 employees strong in just vehicle fleet alone. We have close to 5,000 vehicles in our inventory, and we have 7 fuel sites, which we now like to call the term fuel hubs rather than fuel sites, as you'll learn a little bit more of kind of where we're at. We have a large diversified fleet from everywhere from turf equipment all the way up to fire engines and everything in between, as most of you are probably familiar with in the government space. So hopefully that shares a little bit of kind of where we're at. We're going to talk a little bit about our diversification and clean energy, as well as our next effort in transitioning to a EV implementation strategy rollout of our electrification fleet in the not too distant future. So Rick, if you could, next slide, that'd be appreciated. So to paint a little bit of a picture, I like to think of us as as kind of a variety of flavors in the alternative clean space. Our mission is to have zero emissions by 80% zero emissions by 2050. And I think we're on a great path of getting there. As you can tell by this example, we have a multitude of different fuel types that we like to run in the fleet for a variety of different reasons. Probably nothing that I'm not going to tell you that you don't already know, but as we refer to it as bridge technology or drop-in fuels. While we're ultimately trying to transition the fleet to electrification, we also recognize the fact that we have many vehicles that are going to be in the fleet for the next 5 to maybe 10, if not longer, years that have been replaced over the past. And we'd like to make sure that those vehicles, while they still have a useful life cycle, are currently running on the cleanest available fuels that are available today. We don't particularly think there's a silver bullet in any technology, so we like to run a diversification of different fuels for a variety of different reasons. Some because of the ease of use, some because of the availability, others because of range, and a variety of other reasons. So this is just a picture of a little bit of kind of where we're at and continue to grow with propane, CNG, hybrid, electric, biodiesel, ethanol, and plug-in. We're also really excited to announce that as of last year, we were the first state in North Carolina to transition to renewable propane. So everything that you see in that blue color on the top of the pie chart is not just conventional fuel, it is now renewable fuel. We're also transitioning from a biodiesel to an R99 in the not too distant future in the next month or two. So we'll actually be running renewable diesel as well as renewable propane. We certainly keep our target and eyes on compressed natural gas, hybrid vehicle, and ethanol as well. So we like to call it a diverse mixed fuel bag of fleet vehicles that have all of their emissions and reductions in a variety of different applications. Next slide, Rick. So this is what we like to refer to as our fuel hub, or better known as our fuel sites. What we're ultimately trying to accomplish is a one-stop shop. We don't want to have people go to different locations to get different fuel sites. So what we're building out is what we refer to as fuel hubs, and it's a little bit difficult to see on the top part where the above ground fuel tanks are, but those are different types of fuel types, from E85 to B20 to what will be renewable diesel and everything in between. You can also see some promotions that we're doing in the marketing space, which is at that same facility, which we've done a commercial artist design and actually had murals at our buildings that are supporting from curbside appeal to understanding. Obviously, these are clean energy sites at these facilities. You can also see a couple pictures of our renewable propane dispensers, compressed natural gas, and the lower right-hand corner is actually an 18,000 gallon renewable diesel tank. So when an employee drives up to a fuel hub, they can go to one location and get a variety of fuels. In the not too distant future, we'll be deploying a DC fast charger and a variety of L2 chargers as well for electrification. So not only will they be able to get conventional fuels or renewable clean fuels, but they'll be able to charge their vehicle at the same location, all in one stop. Next slide, please. And so this just shows a little bit of a glimpse. We have some really educated speakers that are going to be after me, and I'm going to leave it up to them to show a little bit about some of the sustainability benefits that come from clean renewable diesel or clean propane and other ways of looking at ways to reduce their measurements. But this is just a glimpse of what we've accomplished just in 2019, just from renewable propane, right? You can see that we've saved 31 cubic tons of CO2 just by switching from conventional propane to renewable propane. We're seeing a broader, obviously, use of it as well by an increase of 12%, which is an additional 37 tons of metric cubic yards of reduction of CO2s. And then if you take that equivalency and you look at it, what does that really mean to you from an environmental message? That's charging over 4 million plus smartphones, right? By just transitioning from conventional petroleum-based to a non-petroleum-based renewable propane. It powers up 8 homes or equivalency to 42 acres of urban brush community, obviously, in growing trees and reducing our carbon emission reduction. So that's just renewable propane, right? As you start to bring in renewable diesel and other drop-in fuels, which is really easy to transition from and to, it has a huge savings in the environmental message, right? And a lot of our fuels, such as renewable diesel, renewable propane, is literally drop-in technology, meaning that we're not building any infrastructure. We're just changing the fuel type by just dropping it into the existing infrastructure that we currently have. Next slide, please. And so this is our upcoming target. We did a very extensive study with ICF to do a EV implementation strategy rollout. Our mission starting in 2024 is to transition our entire fleet of rolling stock of 2,200 vehicles to electrification over the course of the next 10 years. Currently, the city owns and operates 75 electric vehicles and 38 behind the fence and public facing charging locations currently now, which consist of 56 ports, and we have hopefully to have 48 new chargers being installed in 2024. So we're ramping up our efforts in electrification and making sure, obviously, we're doing our best for the community and promoting the industry as a whole. Next slide, Rick, please. So as we deploy the EV implementation strategy, it's a little bit more complicated than the drop-in fuels that we talked about, where the infrastructure is already in place and we're just simply dropping from one fuel type to another. We did a very extensive implementation, and we looked at a variety of different areas in which we needed to make sure that we checked all the boxes. And again, this is a lot different because we're dealing with a lot of different players within the city. It's no longer a fleet deciding to move from conventional propane to renewable propane. And we have to check the boxes with facilities. We have to check the boxes with HR. We have to check the boxes with IT. We obviously have to check the boxes with our energy providers. There's a lot of things that we need to do before we can start rolling out electrification. And so this is just a simple Gantt chart of kind of where we started in 2022 in January, looked at the project team. We looked at development of the EV transition as a report, recommendations for suitable vehicles as which ones were candidates. We looked at the type of charging infrastructure that was needed, whether it's going to be an L2 or DC fast chargers, and how many of those in relation to the vehicles to chargers. We looked at the purchasing and procurement strategy as to how we were going to pay for that incremental increase in cost, and then what is the total cost of ownership and what is the payback as we transition those vehicles from a conventional vehicle, ICE, from a electric vehicle. We also need to think about the training plan as well. So as we work with Rick and others from Wake Tech and other institutions, we have to look at training both underneath the hood as well as behind the wheel, right? Both of them are very significant. We need to make sure that we get that comfort feel from the operators, and the technicians feel that comfort from being able to work on those vehicles. So we need to make sure that the training is in place as well before we start deploying too many vehicles and not having the resources to educate the driver and the technician. We review the charging software because we feel that software is probably the most critical and most useful part of this puzzle as we transition to electrification. And then we wanted to make sure we had best practices recommendations for the alignment of any integration of that software to whatever our current system is. And then the other thing we needed to look at was ways of providing equity throughout the community to make sure that those areas were also reaching public facing, that were reaching areas that were economically disparate, so we didn't lose out any people within the city scope, to make sure that they're also taking advantage of electrification. And then the last part of it was a final report and presentation. Next slide, Rick, please. And here's another flavor, right? So we look at everything and anything, right, that has a sustainability. Everything we touch, everything we do revolves around sustainability. So we're proud to say that in the city of Raleigh, we currently have 2 solar array canopies, and we're driving on sunshine. So these were purchased and acquisition through the ARPA fund money that were available through federal funding. And we are looking at a third unit that's going to be delivered in the next 6 months through Energy Block Grant that we were successful in an application. These two solar array panels actually move with the sun. You probably have all seen them before by beam. We have 2 chargers at each port. We have 2 of them in 2 different park locations that are both available for public access, and the third one on order to be delivered in the next 6 months. And again, we're completely off the grid, available to city vehicles as well as public facing as well. Next slide, Rick. And we also recognize that, hey, when you start putting a lot of chargers, you have more than 7 fuel sites like we currently have now. So it can get out of control in a hurry. So one of the things we wanted to make sure that we were able to recognize where our EV sites are located, whether enabled, disabled, what type they are, whether an L2 DC fast charger, whether it has single port or dual ports. Is it enabled? Is it disabled? Is it public facing? Is it behind the fence? So we collaborated with our friends over at GIS and IT, and they built us what we refer to as our EV mapping tool. Every time we put in a new charger, we can upload this into the mapping tool. We can see what chargers we have, where they're located, so we don't overlap in building more chargers right next to a place that there's already one, or there could very well be a third-party charger. So we don't want to build one where there's already one built that's a commercial charger. So we started identifying where our chargers are at. The system can, as you hover over those dots, you can see a picture of the charger, what type it is, the make, the model, the serial number, whether it's enabled, disabled. You can see everything about that charger rather than a clunky spreadsheet or worksheet, workbook, whatever you want to refer to it as. We now have a enterprise solution where anybody in the city or even outside the city could see it as well and see where our charger's at. So as you see by the dashboard, there's currently 38 chargers, which consists of 56 ports. We are also using the same tool to see where third-party charging is at and also seeing where our employees live. So as we start to build what we refer to as more park and rides rather than build charging stations in buildings, we are looking at commuting. So when people commute from their homes to work, if they don't go into a building, we want to build park and ride so they can park their personal vehicle at a site, pick up their city vehicle, which is being charged overnight, deploy their field service work from those sites, and then guess what? Those chargers are then available to the public during the day while the city vehicles are being used during the day, and then reverse the process when they come back to a base. They can plug in their city vehicle and then jump in their city personal vehicle, then head home. So these will also help us identify where our commuting routes and heavy users are. And so there's a complete filter system on the mapping tool that allows it to turn off public sites, behind the fence, bus routes. And so we can look at the algorithms based on what it is that we're trying to accomplish. Next slide, Rick, please. And this is what I feel is the most important. We're very fortunate. And again, a lot of the technologies that we deploy and the technologies that we use is also timing related. And so we're very fortunate. We have an older fuel management system that has sunsetted. And so in the budget process, we asked for additional money to replace our fuel management EV enterprise software, including hardware. And so we are replacing all of our 7 fuel sites with new infrastructure that will support both the biofuels and alternative clean energy. And they will also be able to get fuel at different hubs. And this software will be able to manage all of our petroleum-based, all of our clean fuels, as well as our EV transactions as well. So we'll be able to enable, disable, do load management, load shedding. We'll be able to see each EV transaction. We'll be able to then charge back to our stakeholders, much like we do with ICE vehicles, because obviously at some point in time, someone's going to need to flip the bill. And as we get to the approach of 2,200 vehicles, that's going to be a hefty energy charge. And certainly we don't want facilities to be burdened with those costs. And much like we do with gaseous fuels, is we want to be able to charge back to our stakeholders internally within the city of Raleigh for the use of consumption of energy, just like they do for a gallon of gasoline. So the new fuel site will be able to manage all of our petroleum fuels, as well as our clean energy, as well as our EV transactions. And we'll be able to do load management as well through one enterprise solution that can be seen citywide. So there's no API, there's no interface, there's no integration. It's all built into one platform. So we're very fortunate to be in that space. Next slide, Rick. And that concludes my part of the presentation. Appreciate you allowing me to be here today. I'll be here throughout the webinar for any questions at the end. And Rick, I'm going to pass the baton back to you. Thank you.
Great. No, Rick, thank you. Appreciate it. I mean, you're doing an all the above approach, and you get a number of balls in the air. It's not simple. You know, it shows the planning and paying attention to what's going on, managing by the numbers. Good presentation. We have a couple questions already came in, but we'll save them for the end. Next up is Mike Sestry with Clean Energy. Mike, we'll turn it over to you and see if you can brighten up that light a little bit. You're in the shadow once again.
I'm trying over here.
A little bit better.
Thanks, Rick.
All right. All yours, sir.
I'm sorry, keep going.
Yep, go ahead. You're all set.
Good morning, good afternoon, wherever you're at. I'm Mike Sestry with Clean Energy and the Director of National Accounts. I've been with Clean Energy, it'll be 18 years next month. So I've seen where this industry started and where it is today, and it's pretty exciting. Next slide, Rick. So just give you a little quick background on who Clean Energy, what we do, who we are. So we're the largest provider of compressed, liquefied, and now renewable natural gas for the transportation sector, specifically focused on the heavy duty market. Going probably as low as transit buses, refuse trucks, ready mix trucks, and now with the new Cummins 15-liter IXN engine, tractor trailers. That's what all the tractor trailer trucking companies have been waiting for. It finally came out Q1 this year, and we'll get more into that as we go. We build, own, and operate over 600 fueling stations throughout the US and Canada. I'll show you a slide coming up on those. We deal with large fleets. Amazon, we built 18 stations for last year. They deployed 3,500 tractor trailers. UPS is running well over 5,000 RNG tractor trailers. Waste Management over 10,000 RNG garbage trucks. Estes, Saia. We're even fueling Jim O'Leary is going to be speaking next with NFI. We're fueling all his tractor trailers at the Port of LA and Long Beach. So this Cummins 15-liter is really going to make a splash. This is the engine that they've been waiting for. So we are, again, the largest supplier and provider of renewable natural gas. We'll get into that in the next couple of slides. We also have great partnerships with some of the largest energy companies in the world, Chevron, BP, and Total. And I think that means a lot to show you where this industry is going. They're investing a lot of money on the RNG space. And again, I think it's great for our industry, and it really shows where heavy duty trucking and transportation is leaning towards. Environmental credit leader, we have a full-time grant writing department in-house. We have a full-time lobbyist in DC to make sure that current policies remain in place and new ones are allocated moving forward. So here are RNG fuel volumes produced and supplied. So right now we fuel about 50,000 customers daily with over 450 million gallons of compressed and renewable natural gas. About a little more than half of that is renewable natural gas. As you see, come 2026, just 2 years away, we will be a 100% renewable company. All of our customers, whether we own our stations or we built a station for our customers and we just built it and operate it, their fueling stations will be supplied with renewable natural gas. Next slide. This just gives you an idea of our footprint, where we are. Like I said, this doesn't include the stations that we built last year. We built 45 new stations last year, so I'm going to have to update this slide. But it just gives you an idea. So these are all the stations that we built. We don't necessarily own all of them. We probably own 65–70%. the other are stations that we built that are mostly private stations for our customers. Next slide. Renewable natural gas, it's proven and available today, and I want to emphasize that. I think that's a big deal. It's proven. And it's one of the only alternative fuels today that makes economic sense, actually significant economic sense. And we'll get into that. So it's also a proven technology. This isn't a research or science experiment. This is a 4th generation dedicated natural gas engine with over 100,000 units produced and running every day. There's no DEF fluid, urea, there's no DPF filters or SCR traps that are associated with diesel trucks. And I'm sure all the maintenance operations guys on this call can tell you stories for a long time about the headaches and the issues that are associated with that. Less oil changes, running renewable natural gas, much cleaner. The range and infrastructure, which we'll get into, is there. There's no range anxiety anymore. And it's significantly quieter. 90%, these engines are 90% quieter than your diesel counterparts. Renewable natural gas is the cleanest and lowest carbon intensity fuel available today for heavy duty trucking. It reduces greenhouse gases anywhere from 70% to 500% compared to diesel. Reduces NOx, your smog and soot, which creates asthma emissions, by 90% compared to diesel. And this is important. It's truly domestic. 98% of the natural gas that we use in this country is from this country, whether that's compressed or whether that's renewable natural gas. Price is not influenced by global politics. It's truly American trucks running on American fuel. We don't have to worry about going from a foreign oil to a foreign minerals or a foreign battery. It's truly a domestic fuel. Next slide. RNG advantage is carbon intensity. So this is, I want to make sure that everyone is aware, this is not a clean energy slide. This is the California Air Resource Board slide. Certified pathways, and this is just shows you CI scores associated with all the different technologies. With regards to the RNG space, all of our dairy gas that we're going to be producing, and I'll get into that on the next slide, is going to LCFS states. So the LCFS states are California, Washington, and Oregon, and New Mexico just adopted the LCFS. We're pretty comfortable that New York will be the next one to adopt the LCFS, hopefully sometime this year, but it may fall into early next year. I think once New York adopts it, you're going to see New Jersey, New Pennsylvania, Connecticut, which typically happens. We just need New York to hopefully adopt it soon. But this is give you an idea on that's dairy gas is the cleanest gas. A lot of our landfill gas is going outside of LCFS states. Next slide. So this is where we're currently producing renewable natural gas. Again, this is all dairy gas. We're producing about 13 projects right now underway, and they each produce around 50 million new gallons of renewable natural gas. Next slide. So this is why renewable natural gas is so popular today, is that, again, today, it's the only alternative fuel that makes any economic sense. When you're saving $2 a gallon and all your other operating costs are going up, your brakes, your tires, your transmissions, your chassis, your body, everything else is going up, you got to look for different ways to remain competitive, to keep existing business and win new business. And this is why a lot of fleets, national fleets, are seriously looking into transitioning from diesel to renewable natural gas. When you can save $1 to $2 a gallon. It's significant when these tractors are burning anywhere from 12 to 20,000 plus gallons each annually. Next slide. So what I wanted to do is I wanted to run a model just to show you how significant the fuel savings are. So this model is in an LCFS state where they have RINs and LCFS credits associated with renewable natural gas. So on this model, I just ran it at 50 RNG tractors and I ran it at 100 RNG tractors. And I just used each tractor burning 15,000 gallons per year each. Now, I could run this model with however many gallons. If you say, oh, my fleet runs, closer to 12, or Mike, we're closer to 20,000 gallons, I could run this model, anywhere in any state. So again, 15,000 gallons times 50 tractors, 750,000 gallons a year over 10 years. This is using clean energy capital to build our customer their own private station on their property using our capital. And these are real numbers. So the monthly delivered cost of gas includes both commodity and the local transportation fee. In California today, you're at right around $1.30. Monthly cost of electricity, again, it's variable monthly. Today, we're seeing at our stations in California around 20 cents per gallon. Our compression fee at $1.30 includes all-inclusive weekly operation and maintenance, clean energy capital recovery, and insurance. That's fixed. Federal tax on a diesel gallon equivalent is 20 cents. In California, most fleets are exempt from California because they purchase a fuel permit per tractor. But if you don't purchase that, it's an extra 10 cents for state tax for diesel gallon equivalent. Then we have in place the alternative fuel tax credit per DGE, comes to 55 cents. That goes back to our customer. And in California, again, it's an LCFS state. So you have LCFS and you have RIN share. This is what it comes to. This changes monthly. It's variable. And this is where it comes out to be today. So all in, using clean energy capital to build our customer stations on their property, our customers are paying $1.70 per diesel gallon equivalent. In California, where diesel is, I don't know what it is today, but it's probably close to $5 a gallon. So this just gives you the idea of the significant fuel savings associated with renewable natural gas. Not to mention, it's the cleanest alternative fuel for heavy duty trucking. Next slide. Just wanted to give you an example of outside of an LCFS state like Texas. Same model, same volume. What you're going to notice is in Texas, natural gas costs are significantly less. So you have 75 cents, about 15 cents for electric, our $1.30 compression fee. State tax is 17 cents, plus federal tax is 20 cents per diesel gallon equivalent, so a total of 37 cents. Again, we're going to give our customers the alternative fuel tax credit. And here's the difference. It's not an LCFS state, so we could only share RIN value. So that 75 cents drops to 20, but if you look at the cost of gas, it went from $1, I forget what it was, $1 and something in California to 77 cents in Texas. So it's almost a wash at the end of the day in California or outside of California. And I could run this model again for any customer, however many tractors you want me to run it, fuel volume associated in any state, and we're going to be significantly under diesel wherever you want to deploy these tractors. So this is just to give you an idea for all the fleets out there that are interested in saving a significant amount of money while reaching your sustainability goals at the same time. Next slide. So this goes back to range and anxiety. So as you saw my, I forget, second or third slide, we have over 600 stations. There's other stations out there. There's not just clean energy stations, but this is a game changer here. So you have now on tractors, Hexagon Agility or Cummins back-of-cab fuel system. The red behind the cab, that's 175 diesel gallon equivalents on board. This has an 800 plus mile range. If you want more than that, you could get a 30-gallon tank on each rail that gets you up to 235 gallons on board and a 1,200-mile range. So there's no range anxiety anymore with these new fuel systems and with all of the new infrastructure that's currently built and continues to be built coast to coast. Next slide. So these are the Cummins near zero engine options. So today you have the 6.7, you have the 9-liter, you have the 12-liter, and again, the game changer is this 15-liter. It has 500 horsepower, 1850 foot-pounds of torque. weighs 500 pounds less than the 15-liter diesel. Again, this came out Q1 this year. It's currently available to order today in Peterbilt and Kenworth, and it will be available Q1 next year in Freightliner. 30 right now, we have 30 of the largest trucking companies that have been testing this engine for about 3 months now. They are all nothing but positive feedback for the most part. The horsepower and torque are right there with diesel. The miles per gallon has gotten significantly better than the 12-liter. And I think that has a lot to do with the 12-liter wasn't the right engine. It was overworking, it was overheating, and was burning more fuel. We're never going to be on par versus diesel. If the diesel tractor is getting 7.5 miles per gallon, we're right around 6.5 miles per gallon. But again, you're saving $1 to $2 a gallon. So the savings are there. The incremental cost, just to give you an idea on the truck side, the incremental cost of this 15-liter engine, including the 175 diesel gallon equivalent fuel system, is around $90,000. Based on that 15,000 gallon per tractor annually, that payback is roughly 3 years, and that's with no grant money. This is just pure payback in real life savings and fuel prices. You add grant money, if we get a quarter of the grant money they're giving to electric and hydrogen, we can make a significant impact on reducing this country's carbon footprint today, not 5, 10, 15 years from now. But again, it's available. If anyone has any questions, I'm here. My next slide is all my contact information. I'll wait till the end to answer any questions.
Mike, thank you. Good case for natural gas and renewable natural gas. A stat you didn't give us that I heard last week, because I kept on it and watched it grow over the years, is the amount of renewable natural gas that is used in transportation. So you talk about natural gas vehicles out there. Right now, across the country, 79% of the natural gas being used is renewable natural gas. So it is that lower carbon intensity that you showed with the carb data. So
Correct.
it is, and you said it and Rick said it. This is something that works here and now today, and that's kind of important if you're really looking at carbon production. Putting it off, it's a cumulative effect. So what you do today impacts the future. So good presentation. I like to everybody's talking electric, but electric doesn't work everywhere. Use what works, in the job that it works at. Well, great. So next up is Jim O'Leary with NFI, and Jim, I'll let you talk about what you folks are doing and what you've learned in doing it.
Sure. Thanks, Rick. And I would actually think a good webinar would be Mike and the electric vehicle manufacturers going back and forth on the value of each. And I also wanted to thank Mike because I wrote down that pricing, and I need to go back and check the pricing that I'm getting in California at your site, not my site.
I'll send it to you. Charles already has it.
Oh yeah. All right. Good afternoon, everybody, or good morning. My name is Jim O'Leary, and I'm the Vice President of Assets at NFI. But more importantly, I wanted to apologize to all you Caniacs out there, because I am a diehard Rangers fan, and now we're on to different challenges, I would say. So in my role, I have the responsibility of procuring all of our company's assets, both tractors and trailers, overseeing their life cycle and the ultimate disposal. And the one thing that's allowed me to do over the last few years is, as this industry has been kind of frothing at the mouth to learn more about battery electric vehicles and alternate fuels, right? Like, my position has allowed me to kind of be front and center on some of that transition. And it really is an exciting time to be part of this industry. I know a lot of us had the opportunity to spend a few days in Las Vegas for the ACT Expo last week, and it's amazing to see 13,000 people basically eat up every word that, whether it was the keynotes or the ride and drive. It's just amazing to see where we are going as an industry. So, but let me tell you a bit about NFI, just for some context. So next slide, Rick. So we are a privately held third-party logistics company that's been in business for over 90 years. We're still owned by the same family that started us over 90 years ago. And we did close to $4 billion in revenue last year. That's shrinking a little bit due to kind of the market that we're in and the cycle that we're in the industry. But we're as strong as ever, and the amount of growth that we've seen over the last 15 years really is an unbelievable story. But we have over 5,000 tractors in operation. We have over 14,000 pieces of trailing equipment as well. But I think the one thing that differentiates us from our competitors is our diversification. So not only is our transportation business like a $1.3 billion business, and I just gave you the stats on how many tractors and trailers we have, but we also operate over 70 million square feet of warehousing in North America, which makes us, I think, the fourth largest operator of warehousing in North America, behind the big guys like Amazon and Ryder. And some of that warehousing, or I would say 15 million square feet of that warehousing, is in Southern California, which is important to the story I'm about to tell with our electrification journey. So next slide. So back in 2018, some would say that we jumped in with both feet in terms of electrifying our fleet. And there are really two main reasons for this, right? One, we had just acquired one of the largest drayage providers in the company, a company called Cal Cartage. And we had known from our previous conversations with the manufacturers that, hey, drayage, which is usually short haul, not necessarily maxing out the weight, would be a perfect and ideal application for electric vehicles. And we basically, we knew from Daimler and Volvo that they wanted to get involved in this space, and it all started from Tesla. But this is that's another story. But that's why we thought, hey, there may be an opportunity for us. So if the legacy manufacturers wanted to go play in the space, we felt like we had the perfect application to go play in the space with them. And then basically at the same time, we were going through a rebranding of our strategy, right? And ultimately that strategy, that corporate strategy that we're moving forward with and still use to this day, really has three pillars. And it's customer value, innovation, and people, right? And if you think about this initiative to move to a zero emissions good movement, right? It fits all three. Like the move to zero emissions good movements fits all three of those pillars, right? Let's think about it, right? I've got customer value, right? Now more than ever, our customers are asking us, and really not only even asking us, almost demanding of us, right? Hey, what are we doing in this space, and how can we help them reduce emissions? Now, the other part of that conversation is, are they willing to pay for it yet, right? But that we could get to in Q&A. The second thing, right? Innovation. I think it goes without saying, like what's more innovative, right, than a Class 8 tractor moving down the highway, pulling 80,000 pounds with no emissions, right? So it fits that as well. And then lastly, it's people, right? Not only do people feel, people want to work more today than ever, especially with the young folks that are entering the workforce today. They want to work for companies that share the same values as them. And we know that young people care more about sustainability than the prior generation and the prior generation before that. So that's one. But not only that, but we also pride ourselves in taking care of the communities and people where we are present, right? And I bring up that Southern California residents because some of the most disadvantaged communities in terms of air quality in Southern California are where we had warehouse presence and where most of those 17,000 employees that you see on that first slide reside. So we felt it necessary to be investing in those communities. Next slide. So what have we done? So in terms of battery electric vehicles, right, the first thing that we did was we put electric yard tractors into use. So we have been operating 27 electric yard horses in our fleet in California. That's about 50% of our fleet. And we have plans to grow it by 11 more by this time, really. We just took delivery of the first 7 trucks and about to put them in service in Southern California. Those yard tractors that we have run have operated more than 100,000 hours and have gone more than 750,000 zero emission miles. When we talk about Class 8 day cabs, and we made mention of it in the beginning, that we were part, and we had the privilege of being part of 2 really groundbreaking projects on the Class 8 tractor side, the Volvo Lights project and the Daimler Innovation Fleet. With both of those projects combined, we installed 10 high-speed chargers, 150 kilowatts if you're interested, 5 level 2 chargers, 626 kilowatts of solar. Now that fleet, while it was in the demonstration, ran more than 800,000 zero emission miles, and we're proud of that as well. But it's not just, I talked a little bit about what we're doing on the distribution side as well as the transportation side, but we're not even looking to cut emissions just out of our fleet. We're also looking at material handling equipment. And I'm proud to say by the end of this year, we'll have 150 lithium powered forklifts operating in our warehouses throughout the country. Next slide. So what are we working on now, right? And this project has gotten some press, so you may have seen some of this in the news or whatever. So the JETC project. So the JETC stands for the Joint Electrification Truck Scaling Initiative. This was a project that we partnered with the South Coast AQMD in California, CARB, and the California Energy Commission to significantly increase the amount of electric trucks on the road. Basically, they wanted to prove, they were done with demonstrating projects in terms of, okay, can we build electric trucks? Can we put them on in a fleet, and can they run? And that was what the Daimler Innovation Fleet was, and that was what Volvo Lights was, right? Now they wanted to prove that it could be scaled, right? So this project called for, we have 50 trucks being deployed out of a single site, 38 high-speed chargers capable of charging it up to 350 kilowatts per hour. But not only do we have that, but we also installed, or are installing, I should say, 7.7 megawatt hours of battery storage and a megawatt of solar at that site alone. And we also built, what we called, and I don't think it is at this point anymore, but it was going to be the first purpose-built shop, owned by a fleet to service EVs. And I'm proud to say today that those 50 of those trucks are in service today. Plus we got 10 additional more through another grant. So we have 60 battery electric vehicles running in and out of the ports of LA and Long Beach. And all together, between the demonstration projects and these trucks that we have now running in Southern California, that we're approaching 3 million zero emission miles. So what have we learned? And I think this is the important stuff. So next slide, Rick. So lessons learned. And, I think if you were at ACT, you heard a lot of people talking about infrastructure or scaling or cost and things like that. And it's all of the above, right? And I think the first thing that I would like to say is that scaling is hard, right? For example, if we just look at this JETSI project, right? We started working on this project in May of 2021, right? With an estimated completion date of original, not what you see on the slide there. The original estimated completion date was Q4 2022, Q1 2023. So you can see now how much of an overrun that we've had. And we're not just talking about a timeline delay. We're also talking about a cost overrun as well. And I'll get into that as well. But I think it's hard because as an industry, and especially as a fleet manager like myself, listen, we're used to once a year, I figure out what my truck order for next year. I don't have to figure out where they're going yet. I don't care where they go, right? I know I've got a replacement style. Hopefully I get some vehicle ads. And then 5 months later, the trucks start coming off the line and I get 30 or 40 a month coming off the line every month. And I'm figuring out where they're going as the year progresses. Right. And me and my team are the only ones really making that decision. Right. A transition to BEV means the whole organization needs to be involved. Right. From contracting, for the JETSI project alone, I signed 10 different contracts, permitting, financing. Right. You need to have the whole organization buying into these projects. And that's just different, right? And that takes time. But you need all those people involved for all of your projects to be successful. And the next thing is just how expensive it all is, right? And maybe we'll get into it a little bit in terms of funding and just the role that funding, plays in this zero emissions goods movement transition. But there's no ROI if there's no funding for BEVs, especially on a Class 8 space. Maybe light duty, there may be an ROI just because of the costs, right? So you look at this project all in between the infrastructure, the land that we had to procure, the grading of that land, the permitting, the cost of the switchgear, the cost of the transformers. This project to put 50 trucks on the road was a capital expense of $45 million. Right now we have funding to offset a lot of that, but just think about that. Think about that cost per vehicle to make this transition. Right, and all indications are that cost is not coming down at this point in time. Right, that we're still relying on funding to keep the TCO at diesel parity. The scaling needs expertise, right? I think if you go to any fleet in the country today, right, I think to a man or to a woman, that they would all say they do not have the expertise in-house to take a project like this soup to nuts. Right? You have to have an expert on the infrastructure. You have to have a utility that you rely on and knows what they're doing. You also have to have an OEM partner from a vehicle perspective that truly understands what it takes to do this, right? And everybody needs to be working together with a common goal for these types of projects to be successful. And then lastly, the comment that I'll make is that I think the vehicles and what we've seen over the last few years is that the vehicles are the easy part. Right? I don't know how many folks that we have in the audience today that run Class 8 vehicles, right? But if you go to any of the Class 8 manufacturers that are currently selling an EV, right? There's only a few of them, a couple of them. They will tell you that they could probably get you a truck within 4 to 6 months today. But meanwhile, the infrastructure will take you double that timeline, right? And knowing the complexities that you could run into on the infrastructure side, like it's important that you get those utilities involved as early as possible to try to avoid any permitting delays or bottlenecks, or if there's an upstream problem that needs to be addressed, and I'll talk a little bit about that on my last slide. But I think it's important to realize that I think the vehicles are there. Now, whether the vehicles are going to be reliable as everybody says, as lower costs for maintenance as everybody says, I still think that's TBD, right? But the vehicles will be delivered when you want them to. Okay, last slide. So I've got this little checklist here, and I'm sure if any of you are about to embark on whether the project is to electrify one truck or 50 trucks, right? I think all of it needs to be done, right? So I think the first thing, and I've touched on a lot of these things, but if we go through and we say, hey, engage the necessary parts of your organization. We touched on why that's important. It really has to be organizational buy-in for these types of projects because it's going to touch so many people. I think the next thing is to make sure, and we didn't really touch on this, but I think most important thing is define an application that you want to electrify, right? Because some of them, it's not possible. And we've all touched on that a little bit today, right? What's the route? How much weight do you need to haul? When is my downtime for charging, right? All of those things go into, hey, does this make sense for me to even attempt to electrify? And then on top of that, I need to choose a location, right? Do I own the facility that we're going to be doing this? Do I rent it? Do I lease it from a customer? Who's going to help pay for it? Is it on me? Am I going to have the customer? All those conversations have to happen up front as well. And then secondly, or next, reach out to the utility. Once you've kind of defined an application, you think you have a project, get that utility involved as soon as possible. It's one of the biggest regrets that I have for the projects that we did early on, is that was almost a secondary thought that, hey, I'm a truck guy. All I really care about the truck. One day some person's going to come in and install infrastructure and I'm good and I don't have to worry about it. We have learned that that is not the case. You probably need to spend more time looking at infrastructure, talking to the utilities, defining a charging supplier, talking about software for your chargers. That was touched on by Rick. I'm glad he said that, because I think those are the most important parts, and what's going to derail a project is the infrastructure aspect. And then the other thing I would say is, hey, then you got to think about future expansion too. If this really is what's going to happen in the industry and more zero emission vehicles and battery electric vehicles are going to hit the road, then think about expansion, because you only want to dig once, right? So when you're laying that conduit in the ground, do you want to, extend it, so you could add 3 to 4 chargers when the time comes, right? And then lastly, and I think I've got one little thing before it goes to my context slide there, Rick. But just pray, right? Pray that you don't have any delays, and everything goes as smoothly as possible. But that's it from my side, and I look forward to a little bit of discussion that we have.
Jim, thanks. Good presentation. I mean, living out in the real world and experiencing the growing pains, we'll call it. And I like the checklist and some of the things you pointed out. It is, you don't just call and have infrastructure delivered, shows up and you're good to go. And you've made a good point where the lead time is a lot longer than the vehicles in a lot of cases. So thank you. Appreciate the insight. And next up is Andy Burnham from Argonne National Lab, and he's going to talk about some of the tools that they have to help you estimate emissions and costs regarding alternative fuel vehicles. Andy?
Thanks, Rick.
Sure.
So appreciate the opportunity to speak with y'all. I will close it out and hopefully we have a decent amount of time for Q&A. So today, as Rick mentioned, I'm going to talk specific about a tool that you can use to do some cost analysis and some of the data behind fueling and basically charging costs, where we see kind of the data where you may understand kind of the variation in cost that will impact kind of your specific situations. So we can move to the next slide. So I work at Argonne National Laboratory, one of the Department of Energy's national labs that do R&D. And we have participated with other labs to do a total cost of ownership study for both light duty and heavy duty vehicles. And I won't get into a lot of the details, but predominantly like the work that we've focused on as a lab has been understanding kind of vehicle costs. So like what the cost of say an electric vehicle is based on the need of a battery motor and so forth compared to a gasoline or diesel counterpart. And then the other space kind of on the cost has been fuel. That a lot of people, understand obviously fuel is crucially important, especially when we start talking fleets, medium heavy duty vehicles where fuel costs can be quite significant. In this study, we covered costs that aren't typically at the forefront of discussion for TCO. So insurance, maintenance was important. Depreciation is really important too when thinking about cost. So some of the just key things that that we looked at is that the costs change throughout the vehicle lifetime, and so understanding things like the changes in maintenance and repair as a vehicle ages, like that was one of our contributions to try to like model that. Another thing is that not all vehicles operate the same. So obviously, when we start thinking about this conversation about fuel costs, VMT and kind of operations are going to drive your bottom line. So like if you're thinking about payback, and that was kind of mentioned before, if you have a lower cost fuel where you're going to have some annual operating savings, you need to be driving enough to pay back that in say your fleet's window that you're looking for. And so many businesses say 1 year, 1.5 years, 3 years maybe for payback is what they shoot for. Maybe municipal fleets have more leeway in that space, but understanding kind of the VMT of the specific vehicle and your kind of savings is really important. And then kind of some of the discussion today about like the costs of today aren't always going to hold true in the future. So some costs may come down. So we're looking at kind of what the labs and industries doing on R&D on say battery costs, that they've been trying to drive down battery costs for a long time, significant reductions, but as volumes increase, again, we might see economies of scale and potentially lower costs. Those things like infrastructure, so the things we were discussing today, dealing with kind of inflation and other issues that are kind of increasing the costs of other parts of the kind of cost of ownership of the vehicle. So being aware that like you have to be mindful, and so fuel costs is a good example of that. And I think I can talk about that in my next slide. Is that historically alternative fuel interest has been driven by fuel prices. So we had good discussion on CNG there about the kind of real nuts and bolts, like how much can you save in certain scenarios. Like this slide is dated, but I like it just to show kind of that fuel prices, obviously for gasoline and diesel, as Fleet Managers know well, that there is significant volatility over kind of decades type time frame for gasoline and diesel. And so when gasoline and diesel prices are high, the interest in alt fuels increases significantly. But we see that's the kind of top two lines are gasoline and diesel, and then we see CNG kind of from public stations and private stations, and being pretty consistent. Like the prices are not going to be very volatile. many of the reasons that were mentioned previously as well. Private stations, oftentimes you're able to have a lower cost, long-term contract, not kind of the fees added to a public station, of course, are kind of not in what you're involved, but we're talking, significant capital costs, which I'll talk about shortly. And then electricity. This one is tricky. There's an asterisk there. Electricity prices in general, pretty, going up very slightly, but, relatively stable. But when we start thinking about charging costs, not just the cost from your rate, and if you have a flat rate, then the cost is that. But if you start having demand charges and other, basically demand charges, costs aren't so simple. And so we'll talk about that shortly. So next slide. So this was again mentioned very well for RNG, CNG, that fuel prices depend on the state. So depending where you're running your fleet, obviously fuel prices will vary. And you have to consider that again with operations, that like making sure that kind of your historic pricing for, say, gasoline, diesel, and kind of what, say, if you're able to get, say, propane or any renewable biofuel, like, are you able to get it? Availability is one, and then kind of what the cost of getting it at a specific location is going to be. I think this was covered well. We can move on to the next slide. When we think about like fueling costs, oftentimes you think, okay, what's the cost per gallon? But we've talked quite a bit about like the infrastructure costs, and not just the time and all the effort to kind of build infrastructure, but in our modeling and our analysis, we've gone through kind of all the fuels to look at what is the cost of building different types of stations. So this is an example for CNG fast fill stations where we got some data and tried to plot it out by dispensing rate. And we see that, the capital cost is, can be quite significant if you're, especially pushing to like a public, CNG fast fill station. Time fill stations, can be a bit cheaper, compressor costs are lower, but, still significant capital outlays. The, again, benefit is that once you start amortizing, or depending on your financing, like you can amortize these costs over hopefully significant amounts of GGE, DGE, and you're going to see that savings that was discussed before. But that obviously is a challenge for capitally constrained fleets, and it has to be considered of like, how do we deal with this? And so obviously some of the things that were mentioned related to, can you get grants? Can you find funding to help deal with this? Because these are incrementally large costs that have to be considered. Go to the next slide. So when we think about electric vehicles, utilization of the charger isn't talked about a ton, but it can be really important. And so as fleets, you consider, like, we have to make sure that our vehicles are not down, when we want them to be up, right? And so they can't be fueling all day in some to hinder your operations. But when the kind of flip side of that coin is that as we start looking at higher and higher power charging, the cost of delivering that electricity, kind of on the utility side, become more and more. So basically, electricity costs are, say, three things: a fixed rate, the base rate kind of per kilowatt hour, and then oftentimes again per kilowatt. So kind of thinking like the pipe basically, and the demand charge is how big the pipe is, and so the bigger the pipe, the more the cost is. But if you have a lot of flow, a lot of electricity, like you can amortize that demand charge over a lot of kilowatt hours. So kind of this graph shows that like if you are just using the charger a lot, you're utilizing it and kind of amortizing all these demand charges over, like you can really significantly reduce the cost. But if you have a really kind of peaky charging profile and you are charging all the vehicles kind of at the same time, but you're not using a ton of kilowatt hours, like the demand charges can be really, really significant. And even kind of, you see some of the amortization of that green line too, is all your hardware costs too. Like, you want to amortize that over lots of kilowatt hours being dispensed. So that's kind of the point that I want to make there. So next slide. So the A-Fleet tool was a tool that helps people understand these costs. We developed it not only for light duty and heavy duty, but also for off-road vehicles. We cover a wide range of fuel and vehicle technology. Since we are Department of Energy, we want to represent the best data that we can find for all alternative fuels. So natural gas, propane, hydrogen, biofuels, electricity, and so forth. We have a spreadsheet and online version of the tool. If you're into kind of spreadsheets, that has a lot more of the details, all the kind of equations, where the sources of data. If you kind of want to just stick to the, what's the answer, or let me run some scenarios, the online is much easier to use. Next slide. The data that we get kind of covering, we try to represent the state-based pricing for public and private fueling. We use data from the Clean Cities Alternative Fuel Price Report. That is kind of a snapshot at time, and then we always have to kind of figure out, projecting out into the future is obviously a challenge. A lot of the graphs and charts that I was showing was some of the data and research that we've done before. So we have actual estimates of fueling infrastructure, construction costs, operating and maintenance for basically every single fuel that you can use for either payback or TCO type analyses. Those are not always going to be the cost that you're going to pay. So obviously, like updating any of the costs, or putting some bounds, lower upper cases will help you understand, like, what it could be, because we heard about cost overruns. And so if you are expecting kind of the cut rate costs, and you don't kind of budget in potential overruns, your payback or TCO might not look as good in the end of the project as you thought in the beginning. And kind of hitting on the demand and like the charger costs, we've created some calculators specifically for examining that. And so I'll really, really quickly, next 2 slides, just go over those calculators. So next slide. The utility rate calculator covers specific utility electricity rates for residential, commercial, public, fleet, basically type of charging. So you can enter your details of like how you're going to be charging the vehicle, what time of day, the charger type, the amount of kind of kilowatt hours ultimately that you need. And if you have demand charges, you're going to be able to see this kind of as a representation of like, okay, I'm charging during these peak times, and the cost of electricity is going to be, maybe 20, 50, twice the price as the off-peak prices. So it allows you to kind of play with scenarios to understand. I think this is always mentioned when you think about electric vehicles, like always contact your utility right away, because of these long lead times and trying to figure things out about helping you kind of pick the right rate, get the infrastructure. But this is a tool that will help you, at least start to see some of the scenarios and think about your operations and how different rates might impact your operations. Next slide. And just kind of one step beyond like just the charging costs, we start thinking about all the other kind of what's the total cost of charging an electric vehicle. So we have to amortize the capital costs, so equipment, chargers, any make-ready costs, to yeah, as mentioned before, you don't want to like break concrete more than once. You want to lay your conduit one time, and then install the chargers later, right? And so all those costs, annual operating, communications, warranty, maintenance, we have estimates for that for level 2, fleet charging all the way to 50 to 350 plus kilowatt chargers, and then we build in kind of that utility cost to give you that total cost of charging. So these tools are available in our spreadsheet. We're developing online versions of the EV utility rate and the charger TCO, which will be out later this year. And that's my last slide. Thank you very much. Appreciate your time.
Andy, thank you. A lot of work went into the tools you guys have developed. There's a lot of good information out there, and I encourage everybody to take a look at it, poke around. You can learn something in trying to put a project together. So at this point, we're going to go ahead and open up to Q&A. There's Andy had 1, 2. These are extra ones, Andy.
Few backup slides that if you want to learn how to use the tool, they're in the deck there for you. But
Gotcha. This deck will be distributed to everybody that registered, so these are for your information, extra slides that were included. So we do have a few questions out there. We'll go start. I think you guys can see all this. Some in the Q&A, and there's one in the chat. I guess Rick, I mean, you talked in your site. You have a number of different fuels. I mean, how is that to handle? I guess you guys were lucky with that one site and that it was planned and it was all built at once. It's a fairly new site, but as you're putting stuff further out as well, some other depots. Talk about how you're handling multiple fuels, I guess.
Yeah. Thanks, Rick. Appreciate that. Good and great question. Right before we launch any type of drop-in fuel, we always do a pilot, like I think everyone probably already does, right? So we do it in small doses. We may try it on just a couple fixed vehicles, and making sure that there's no, I shouldn't say side effects, but any challenges that we may experience in trying drop-in fuel. So we do it in a small scale and work our way up. We haven't had any trouble with any drop-in fuel from renewable propane and looking at renewable diesel. None of those have caused any issues. I think we're in a fairly good climate. I will say, Raleigh, North Carolina doesn't get too terribly cold. It does get a little bit of heat during the difficult times of the month, July, August, September. But for the most part, we're in kind of, I would say, mild climate, compared to maybe some other regions and maybe the West Coast, which is obviously, Groundhog Day, 75 and blue skies every day. We haven't had any fallout from any of those drop-in fuels. We've been real successful and fortunate. I think there was another question as well regarding ethanol fuels as to how, whether they're dedicated. To answer that question, Rick, if I could, long as I'm speaking.
Sure.
A lot of our vehicles that do run on ethanol are biofuel, so they can run on conventional gasoline and they can run off of E85. However, we are fortunate because of the technology that we deployed is we can obviously dictate where that vehicle gets fuel if it's at one of our fuel sites, so that it's only authorized to get E85. So while the vehicle may be biofuel, we certainly can tell them that, when they swipe their card or when they start the beginning and end of the transaction, that they're only authorized to get certain fuel types. So we can control it that way, even though the vehicle is biofuel. Hopefully I answered those two questions.
Yeah. And well, there was another one I think there was regarding the beam canopies. It asked how quickly the vehicle is charged. What options did you select? What are those? The level 2s?
Yeah, great question. Those are L2, so they are level 2 equivalent chargers. Those happen to come up with Blink chargers. Everybody's probably heard of Blink, right? We're agnostic long as it's OCPP compliant. That's our biggest challenge, is that we want to make sure that all of our chargers, and we do try to standardize with the type of chargers, but we want to make sure that they can communicate to our upcoming new fuel management system. So we want to make sure they are OCP compliant, regardless of the brand name. We did go with 40 kilowatt chargers. Keep in mind, there is on each beam charger, there are 2 ports. So while it's 40 kW, if they're both plugged in at the same time, both vehicles are going to get 20 kW opposed to one at 40. But they are level 2, and they'll see the same results depending on the discharge of the battery. You're gonna see full charge in 6 to 8 hours. So it depends on depletion of that battery when the vehicle pulls up to the site. But they are capable of fully charging the battery to full capacity, with 2-in-1 charge, which is about 265 range miles. Right.
Okay. Yeah. How quick does a vehicle charge? The answer is it depends. I mean, it depends state of charge of the vehicle. This depends upon what vehicle it is and what charge rate it can take as well. But you answer the question 40 kW. Right.
Yep. And you're right. You followed up that really well because it just depends, right? Depends on the discharge of the battery. Depends on the type of vehicle.
But they do offer a number of different configurations on what your charge rate can be, or your charge capacity.
Absolutely.
Now, moving on to Mike's presentation, the 15-liter Cummins, what footprint is it? Is it just?
So the answer to the question is no. So as you retire old diesels, that's when you bring on new natural gas. These are dedicated engines with dedicated fuel systems. So I've been doing this long enough, almost 18 years. I have seen some upfitters. Unfortunately, they came and went. But what a truck is meant to run on one fuel to be at the end of the day, whether it's gasoline, diesel, renewable natural gas. When you start messing around, swapping out engines, swapping out fuel systems, you just create more headaches and more problems than it's worth. Currently today, there is no upfitter that's taking a 15-liter diesel and putting in a X15N new natural gas engine. So like I said, as you retire all diesels, that's when you want to bring on new natural gas.
Right. Now this is a little different flavor of the stat I said. It's asked how much RNG can be produced domestically in order to replace fossil natural gas. My understanding is like 1% of NG is RNG. Now there's a lot of natural gas that's used in industry and for heating homes, etc. And we're looking at transportation. I can't comment on the 1% of all natural gas used as RNG, but in transportation, that 79% is a number that was given to me last week at ACT.
And that's correct. And even our portfolio is probably around 60 to 75%. And that's again specific to the transportation sector. You are seeing companies that are purchasing RNG for their hospitals, for their campuses.
Right.
So it is being used in different applications, commercial applications besides transportation. But I don't know the answer to that part of
I can step on that one. We studied that a little bit. I think we saw that you could potentially cover about 10 to 12% of the diesel fuel consumption using RNG, and that's like kind of using all the RNG available, not even just kind of like currently available feedstocks, but using more food waste and so forth. So that's kind of like our estimate of the upper bound with current technology.
Right. Well, it's point on that is there is more capacity coming online, over time for RNG, more digesters, more capture.
And just Rick, real quick, just put that in perspective. He said 10 to 12% of all transportation.
Right.
Jim, the number. How many tractor trailers total are running throughout this country every day? Do you know that?
I don't know that number off the top of my head.
It's significant.
I have to look it up on AIS.
So even if you get 10 or 12% of the trucking industry, it is a significant number.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah.
The one of the things with the medium and heavy duty, I mean, the amount of fuel they consume, they are the low hanging fruit. 5% of the vehicles on the road and more than 50% of the emissions.
Right.
So
it's hundreds of thousands of tractor trailers.
Yeah.
But just really quick, and we think that too, and that's the way that we think. But when we talk to our customers who are looking to take emissions out of their supply chain, they're looking elsewhere right now because of the cost.
Mhm.
They put $1 per like GHG ton emission, and they're basically just taking it in order that way. And when they
Right.
get $500 per ton or whatever it is, right, that's not worth it to them, right? Yet.
Right. Now, with the CNG vehicles or RNG, I mean, is there a difference in payload capacity?
Yeah, so a 175 diesel gallon equivalent fuel system full weighs about 3,200 pounds. Now, I don't know what the same diesel fuel system liquid full weighs, but with natural gas, you get a 2,000 pound weight allowance. So after that 2,000 pound weight allowance, it's almost a wash. The RNG may be a little bit heavier, but it's not much. I don't have the exact numbers, but I could find out what a 175 liquid diesel tank.
Yeah, it's about 1,300 pounds.
Yeah. That's why they incorporated the 2,000 pound weight allowance.
Right, that's how you, so there is no hauling capacity change running with the natural gas. They're the same with that allowance. And then there was somebody asking about your capacity in the chat. Yeah, I guess what is your clean energy's production capacity in RNG right now, and can you increase it?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. So right now we have 13. I forget what slide it was. I think we have 13 dairy projects underway. And each of those dairy projects are producing roughly around 50 million new RNG gallons. And we continue to, there's going to be more and more come underway. We're not done with those 13.
Right.
It's just dairy gas. Now we also have landfill gas, a whole nother side of the renewable space.
Yeah. And that's one I was going to bring up. We had Waste Management on last year, one of the webinars we did, and they're at 90% renewable natural gas with a target of 100. You know, they haul it and they make it. And
Yeah.
they've been one of the big proponents early on of natural gas and the whole refuse industry as a whole.
Well, the refuse industry as a whole today is about 65% natural gas. So you see where that went. It went from nothing to 65%. Now, when we in the trucking industry, we don't have to, because the trucking industry is that much larger than the solid waste and recycle industry. Again, if we get 10% of the trucking industry, it's a home run.
Right. So no, and that's, you know, your point on 65%. I mean, it's been at least 10, 12 years that 50% plus of the new refuse haulers built in the US were natural gas vehicles. I haven't looked at it recently, but it was there for a long time, and if anything, it's higher.
Yeah, new natural gas trucks coming off the assembly line in the refuse sector is 70-75%.
That is that high, because it was 55 going back 7 to 12 years ago.
And it's a different application. So it's a stop and go application where the DP, the urea, is a much more challenging application.
Absolutely.
So that's a big driver for the transit sector and the refuse sector and the ready mix sector, is those stop and go applications where diesel is a nightmare.
Outstanding, and fire trucks for that matter too. That's why a lot of them have the idle reduction.
Correct.
And they go from, you know, at least a couple I know, from manual regens every 20 hours to manual regens every 70 hours, and their maintenance costs go down, etc. So
Correct.
I think we're pretty much at time, and as we went through all that's been asked by the audience, any closing comments or reinforcements from our panel before we close out the day? All right, I think we're good. I appreciate everybody's time, and we're going to wrap it up here. Good day, all.
Thank you.
Everyone.
All right.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you for attending.